Mr. Speaker, I rise today to advise honorable members of the completion of the audit of the Consolidated Fund financial statements for the year ended March 31st, 2023, which were tabled in this honorable House earlier today. As honorable members are aware, the Consolidated Fund is the general operating fund of the Bermuda government and is the fund through which the government conducts the majority of its transactions. The Consolidated Fund financial statements report the financial position, operations, and cash flows resulting from the activities of the government. This includes the accounts of the Senate, the House of Assembly, all government departments, and all courts. Mr. Speaker, in her report, the Auditor General highlighted that, with the exception of one matter that I'll address later, the statements were deemed to fairly reflect the financial position and operations of the Consolidated Fund. This positive endorsement in almost all areas of work in relation to the financial statements is a testament to the efficacy of our financial process and operations and to the hard work of our teams to ensure that financial integrity is upheld. Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General has qualified her audit opinion in relation to the assessment of the government's compliance with a new accounting standard that came into effect on April 1st, 2022, relating to the estimates associated with the legal obligations for the eventual retirement of tangible capital assets and the associated disclosures. The Auditor General based her opinion on the audit evidence provided to support the asset retirement obligations of the government as of the year ended March 31st, 2023. However, the disclosure in the financial statements recognized that the government has not yet completed its assessment in this regard. In fact, Mr. Speaker, as highlighted in the recent statement given by the Minister of Public Works, the government has already done considerable work on this new standard using its teams of internal professionals. However, as evidenced by the disclosures made by other governments subject to the same standards, such as Canadian provincial governments, validation by external experts of the estimates and methodology was deemed to be a key factor to meet the new requirements. Mr. Speaker, this new standard requires the government to provide an estimate of potential future liabilities, and the focus of the outstanding work relates to the potential cost for the removal of asbestos in buildings which it is yet unknown when they will in fact need to be retired. Therefore, government has had to carefully weigh the cost versus benefit of allocating funds for external experts to assess and verify our approach or investing in much-needed infrastructure upgrades. With a full year of implementation of this standard now having been completed, we'll continue to assess the best approach to ensure that the interests of the people of Bermuda are appropriately balanced. Mr. Speaker, the government was able to meet the required disclosure requirements of the other significant new standard, which came into effect on April 1st, 2022, in relation to financial instruments. This information provided under significant accounting policies, Note 3G. Compliance with this new standard was also noted as a key matter in the audit opinion of the 2023 statement of the Canadian provincial governments. Mr. Speaker, under the Audit Act 1990, the Auditor General is able to include in her report any comments she considers appropriate. Accordingly, the Auditor General has this year, as in prior years, included an emphasis of matter paragraph to draw attention to, and I quote, the usefulness of financial statements, and her view that the financial statements are not summary financial statements. In other words, they do not represent the combined financial position and activities of all government entities, only the activities of the Consolidated Fund. This section of the report does not alter the Auditor General's opinion on whether the financial statements are presented fairly. The other information section is inclusive of financial statement discussion and analysis, which is included within the identified audited financial statements. Mr. Speaker, highlights the Consolidated Fund financial statements are as follows. The March 31st, 2023 total accounts receivable, net of provision for doubtful accounts, increased by 8.5%, or to $222.8 million, as compared to $205.3 million on March 31st, 2022. The net accounts receivable balance was 19.7% of total revenue for the year. However, it is important to highlight that a significant portion of the gross receivable on March 31st, 2023 represents payroll tax, which was due and payable on April 15th, 2023, which is, of course, in the next financial year. During the month of April 2023, the government collected approximately $145 million in payroll taxes. A full actuarial evaluation was carried out on March 31st, 2023, to produce the estimates included in the financial statements. The actuarial evaluation resulted in a liability for pensions and retirement benefits of $2.027 billion, representing a 7.6% increase from March 31st, 2022, which is net of plan assets of $613.9 million. Total revenue raised by the Consolidated Fund for fiscal 2022-23 was approximately Total revenue raised by the Consolidated Fund for fiscal 2022-23 was approximately $1.129 billion, representing an increase of $43.5 million or 4% from 2021-22's total revenue of $1.086 billion. This exceeded original budget estimates by approximately $51.3 million or 4.8%. The most significant generators of revenues for fiscal 2022-23 were payroll taxes, accounting for $488 million, or 43% of revenue, and customs duty, accounting for $225 million, or 20% of revenue. Current expenses for fiscal year 2022-23 were $1.32 billion, representing an increase of $30 million or 2% from fiscal 2021-22's total of $1.29 billion. The three largest components of current expenses were employee costs, grants and contribution, and interest on debt. Total employee costs were $623 million, or 47% of total expenses. Grants and contributions were $329 million, or 25%, and interest on debt was $136.5 million, or 10%. Total current expenditure on a modified cash basis, which is important, Mr. Speaker, because that is how this Honorable House conducts its budgeting, was $1.1 billion, which was $22.8 million more than original budget estimates. The all-inclusive result from both current and capital on an accrual accounting basis for the year ending March 31st, 2023 was an accrual deficit of $260.8 million, $26.8 million lower than the prior year's accrual deficit of $287.6 million. However, Mr. Speaker, as I mentioned before, the government's budget reflects expenditures on a modified cash basis, which adjusts for all the non-cash expenses which are required to be included on a financial statement for accounting purposes. And the cash all-inclusive results from government operations on the same basis shown in the budget book was a deficit of $34.7 million. This compares to a deficit of $70 million that was originally budgeted. Therefore, the actual budget deficit was down by $35.3 million, or more than 50% when compared to the original estimate. The decreased deficit is primarily a result of higher than budgeted revenues. This deficit reduction is part of the government's medium-term expenditure framework strategy to achieve a balanced budget. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the Auditor General and her team, the person in the Accountant General's Department, and persons in other ministries who are involved in progressing the audit. The 2022-23 fiscal results are indicative of the government's ability to prudently manage current and capital expenditures while increasing revenues as we progress towards a balanced budget. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.